Thank you, Dr. Kim. We used to work together in Sogang University before we became famous. Well, he's more famous than I am, but you know what I mean. You know what I mean. Well, what I would like to talk about today, when I was deciding the key issues, of course, it's a little bit just my opinion of what the key issues are. But from my understanding of the research, I chose 3 issues that I thought needed the most change or needed the most attention to improve our reading classes and our own reading ability. Most of you, I know, are students of English, and you're still improving your English as well, your reading ability. Learning a language never ends, right? No matter how high you go, you can always go higher. I think just a few days ago I saw some new vocabulary words in English. And I thought, oh no, I have to look up these words. Right? There's always more that we can do. So I hope as a teacher, as a student, as a teacher, as a learner, there's some things here that will be useful for you. My first question there is, what are the main factors in developing L2 reading proficiency? Now, there are many, many factors. I don't have them all here. But I chose 4 factors that, if we think about what we do in the classroom, what are some of the biggest ones? And a lot of us do intensive reading practices. It's still very common in a lot of countries and a lot of classrooms. I won't go into too much detail about intensive reading, extensive reading, and so on, but you all know intensive reading if you're Korean, because Korean high school especially does intensive reading. But your college university classes do that a lot also. So it's a little bit challenging text, or sometimes very challenging text. And the students try to read the text, they answer comprehension questions, and then the teacher, the professor, will go through the text line by line, explaining in detail what every phrase means, what every word means, maybe translating into Korean at times. I see this a lot on EVS, the EVS shows. So they have a sentence, and then it goes English to Korean, just going back so quickly, explaining it exactly. Now, there's some good things about this. But my question is, in a classroom, how much time should we be spending on this particular thing? Because there's other factors as well. I was going to go one by one. My PowerPoint skills have failed me. Don't look. The second one is developing the top-down skills approach. And this has been very trendy for, well, maybe the last 3 decades, but especially in the 80s, they started talking about what are the reading skills that are necessary, the reading strategies that we need to know. A lot of those, not all, but many of those are the top-down skills. Guessing words from context, pre-reading, activating background knowledge, schemata, that sort of thing. Reading textbooks today very much have a lot of this, like skimming, scanning, guessing from the context, and so on. Developing bottom-up skills. Now, in a way, actually, the first one also is very much bottom-up skills, but for here, I mean very particularly about vocabulary, expanding the vocabulary, making the vocabulary larger. And then finally, time on task, which in this context means just how much time are they actually reading. So in your 50-minute class or 2-hour class, how much time are they actually reading? How much time are they thinking about vocabulary, indiscrete vocabulary, discrete vocabulary, developing skills and strategies, and so on. And so that's my question there. In our classrooms, as teachers of reading, and as students for our own reading practice time, how how do we balance these things? They're all good. These are all good things. But what is being neglected? What needs to be brought up a little bit more? What practices maybe we should start going down a little bit? I want to talk about what the research has to say about this kind of issue. Now, the first issue then I take from this is reading and vocabulary size. I think that this is not so controversial in that to be a good reader, your vocabulary has to be fairly large. That's not really a mystery. But I think during the 80s and the 90s, we kind of lost this focus. We kind of lost that a little bit because we started thinking about the skills and the strategies, the top-down. And maybe we went a little bit too much that side, at least in the West, at least from the English perspective, the American perspective. Now, this is a very recent study, and actually it has not been published yet. But it's been a study that went on for 2 years. It was quite large scale. It was done by Professor Alderson, who's over in England. And the results have started to come out, but it hasn't been published in a peer-reviewed journal as of yet. So I can't give a whole lot of details about it. But what Alderson and the other professors did was, for 2 years, they tracked students learning foreign languages, especially for reading. And what tasks, what activities, what kind of just attributes about the readers predicted success. So what was working? What was working for these students over 2 years? Now, this is not a quote from Alderson himself. This was just from the release, which was kind of summarizing Alderson's work. But it does give a nice summary. The size of the student foreign language vocabulary and understanding of text influence one another. So it's kind of saying your comprehension and your vocabulary size, they really work together in this way. Vocabulary growth promotes comprehension. Comprehension helps a reader to learn new words. Now there's something kind of interesting in that second half of the sentence. So to read well, what do you need? Vocabulary growth. You need to get the vocabulary to go up. To learn vocabulary, what do you need? Read more. So it's a circular kind of argument in a way. It's not learn vocabulary, okay, now you can read. It's not, well, just read and you'll naturally learn vocabulary. It's kind of a circle, each feeding the other, each one feeding the other. Now, this is not controversial from the vocabulary scholars like Paul Nation, that reading is one of the best ways to build up the vocabulary. Of course, listening is good, explicit study is good, these are all good things. But there's something about reading which kind of does the most for vocabulary building. Actually, before I go to the slide, I just wanted to say, there was kind of an argument between Krashen, you all know Stephen Krashen, comprehensible input, don't study vocabulary, don't study anything. Just listen, just read, you'll get everything. And between Cobb. Cobb was the creator of the complete lexical tutor, which Dr. Shin talked about earlier today. And their argument was, from Krashen's opinion, reading's the best way to build up vocabulary. Don't memorize vocabulary. Don't study it like that. Just read. Just keep reading, extensive reading in particular, and you'll get that vocabulary. Cobb argued that it's true. Reading builds up vocabulary. Reading is not an option. You need it for vocabulary, but reading alone is too slow. It takes too long to get that vocabulary up to a high level. He projected it would be decades. And Krashen disagrees. Right? They never really gave up on that fight. Most people, I would say, are on the side of Cobb and Nation, saying that it's a combination. But when I was looking at the literature, I found the study from Griffith, which was not exactly about reading or vocabulary, but to me, these kinds of studies kind of add to the argument, kind of answer that question. Now, I've taken Griffith's information, I rearranged her data. This is not how she presented her information, but what she basically did was had two groups of students. Some were very successful, some were not successful. Good learners, bad learners. Use the word bad. Poor learners, I guess, maybe sounds nicer. And what she did was then survey them. How do you study English in this case? How do you study English? What do you do? And she wanted to see, how do the good learners answer? What are the successful ones doing in their study time? What are the poor learners doing or not doing? And so, again, this was not how she presented her information, but I thought this was an easier way to present her information. I apologize to her if she's here, but I know she's not. So what I looked at was what were the differences between the good learners and the poor learners? What was the biggest gap in the surveys? And I ordered it according to the largest gap. This was the largest gap between the two. That the successful learners had some kind of plan to study vocabulary, consciously learning vocabulary. Maybe student lists, maybe a vocabulary program, I don't know. But in some way they're consciously do it. The unsuccessful learners didn't have that plan of how to make their vocabulary larger. Now, the differences between all of these is very, very small. I can't say this is number one because they're so close. It's statistically insignificant. They're all about the same. But there's also reading books in English which showed up here as well. Now, whenever you have this kind of study, there is a danger of guessing cause and effect. The correlation does not equal causation. So if you look at this, you might think, well, let's take watching TV in English. The students who watch TV in English, that makes them the good learners. That makes them successful. Before watching TV, nothing. After watching TV, now they're successful. This caused their success. Watching movies caused their success. Is that necessarily true? Not necessarily true. It could happen the other way. First, they became good in English, and then they began to watch TV in English. But they were already good. They got good first, then they watched movies, then they made friends with English speakers. Now, we don't know from her study what caused what. We only know they're related in some way. In my opinion, I don't think watching TV in English, if you're a low-level learner, helps very much. I don't think so. About 12 years ago, I was studying the Korean language very hard. And I had this idea, I'm going to watch Korean TV every day. And there was a sitcom, a Korean sitcom, which was in the reruns. They're just showing old reruns. So every day I could see this sitcom. 3 boys, 3 girls. 남자 셋, 여자 셋. And it seemed kind of fun. And so I watched that almost every day, in my memory. I don't remember for sure, but I think it was almost every day, for several months. After 2 or 3 months, the result? Nothing. Nothing. It did not get easier at all. It was way over my head. The only thing I thought was this, oh, blah, 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 oh, I go, blah, blah, blah. Right, you know that show. And actually, after 5 or 10 minutes, I stopped listening. I just watched the pretty girls. That's all I did. It was just overwhelming for me. So in my view, a lot of these, they became good doing something else, and then they started to watch TV and enjoy it. Then they made friends with native speakers and so on. Except for the 2 ones in red. I think this is something they probably did from the very beginning. I want to learn English, I need more vocabulary. And they studied more vocabulary than the teacher was giving them, because they were motivated. Reading books in English could be the same as these. You know, if they just pick up Harry Potter, That's very difficult for a low-level student. I know because I picked up Harry Potter Hangulpan, and I started to read Harry Potter, and by page 3, I just gave up. Just go to hell, Harry Potter. Just put it up on the thing. It was too difficult. I was getting nothing. I was getting nothing from it. But, as we talked about today, graded readers. Right? There are a lot of materials for reading at the different levels. And so it's possible that they were reading the right level books and getting better and better and better. It's possible. Again, speculation. Well, when I look at this kind of information, I feel that vindicates Cobb and Nation. We need both. So explicit vocabulary study, but a lot of input also, probably through reading. Listening is really hard to find the low-level stuff in great quantities. It's getting easier, though. Now, the need for vocabulary. I put these numbers here for a reason. They're somewhat meaningful goals for learning vocabulary. The first 2,000 vocabulary words are kind of these core foundation words that you find everywhere. Every genre has these words. Whether it's Harry Potter book, Wall Street Journal, it doesn't matter. These words just come again and again. They make up about 80% of any text. About 80% comes from those 2,000 words. Now the 5,000 goal, I think for university students, this is a goal that they should have to get up to 5,000. High school students usually get this. But for university, I think it needs to get up to 5,000. More if they're quite ambitious. At 5,000 vocabulary, that's a level of being competent. You can't speak perfectly, but you say what you need to say. You have the vocabulary to express yourself, and it's good enough. You can read books somewhat well enough. You can listen to things somewhat well enough. It's still a little hard, though. Still a little hard, but you can do it. 9,000 is what you need to get about 98% coverage of texts. And you need that 98%. You need to get up that high. If you have 98% coverage, well, 95%, 98%, your top-down skills can help you with the missing 2% or the missing 5%. Your top-down skills. Your schemata, guessing from context, and so on. If your coverage is less than 95%, top-down skills, work, fail. Work, fail. It's kind of very risky. You need your vocabulary to be quite high to really use the top-down skills well. Now, I put this as a mountain because it is. Is it easy to learn 9,000 vocabulary words? No, absolutely not. Especially the way that some students study them. I know a lot of students who will memorize words and forget words. Kind of like memorizing, forgetting. You've been there too. I bet. I've certainly been there with Korean words. So it's a little bit hard in some ways. Teachers need to give them some guidance. Now, on how to build vocabulary, I'm not going to go into this too much. But again, just to make the point that I think this is the combination that students need. If you have a reading class, if you're teaching reading, you can't ignore their vocabulary size. You can't. It's the more that they build their vocabulary, I think, is more important than more practice with skills and strategies. That's my feeling. It's more important than you translating that sentence into Korean so they understand exactly. This you'll get more. Extensive reading and narrow reading, these work together. What you study, what you memorize, you start to see it in your reading again and again. They work together. They work together. Now, for explicit studies, what you will do in your classroom, I'm not going to talk about that very much. That's too much ground to cover. Paul Nation loves the word cards. He really thinks, even for the college students, should make some word cards. Sure. Yeah, they can work very well. We usually think of word cards for the elementary school or maybe middle school, but even for the older students, yeah, why not? The call and mall options, these are just, there's so many. There's a number of programs that will help you memorize vocabulary, and it's computer-based. And the main thing about these is they have repetition schedule. So the 5 words or 10 words you learn today, the computer will say the next day, oh, time to review those words. And then a week later it says, oh, remember last week's words? Check those again, check those again. Then a month later and so on. Computers are kind of nice about that. So they don't let you forget what you study. Word cards can be the same way though, if you have a system, if you have a review system. But again, this is something I think in our reading classes we should be doing. We should kind of help them learn how to study vocabulary. So have them work with word cards, practice it. Have them maybe use some kind of online thing to help. There's free programs, there's commercial programs, there's a lot of things out there. But I think in the reading class, bring it in. Because that's what the students really need. Now again, explicit study alone is a little bit unsuccessful, even with some good repetition programs. Extensive and narrow reading. I'll talk more about these in a moment, but very briefly, who has heard about extensive reading you already know? Can you raise your hand? Come on, don't be shy. Extensive reading. Okay. How about narrow reading? Maybe even fewer hands will go up for that. Okay. I have Starbucks. No, I don't have any. Starbucks coffee. Yeah, come with me after the show. Well, to be very simple, just to be okay for this slide, extensive reading is reading a lot. It's a lot of text. And, you know, ideally something like 20 minutes a day, if you could do it. So it's just a lot of reading going on. And it's somewhat easy reading. Not very many new vocabulary words. You don't need your teacher to explain it. You maybe don't even need a dictionary. Most of the words you already know. It's the graded readers, right? Find the book, your level, great. Read that level 20 times. Then go to the next level. Read 20 of those books. Just reading, reading, reading. That gives the repeated exposure that they need. Keep seeing those words again and again. Narrow reading is very, very similar. It's a little bit more difficult reading. I'll explain that in a moment. But the same concept, a lot of reading. Now, I'll leave this point here, but I just want to impress again that these work together. Most reading classes don't have either of those. A lot of reading classes don't have that. And I think we're missing a big piece. We're missing a big piece of the picture there. Now, issue number 2 is about reading speed. And particularly about sight words, because that's how you get reading speed. Now, this is very related to issue number 1 about vocabulary. It's not only learning vocabulary, but making it sight words. Making the vocabulary sight words. Efficient comprehension requires a minimum of 180 words per minute reading. So if you want to be a good reader, you need to be reading about this fast. 1 minute, you cover 180 words. I've tested this a lot with Korean students. And most Korean students' reading speed is about 100. It's about 100. Now, when I was in Sogang University, it was higher than that. Now I'm in Daegu Hana University, it's lower than that. But it's even the students who are kind of good readers are still reading too slowly. There's something a little bit missing with that. A lot of my students say, I don't care, Professor Miles. I don't care if it's fast. And then I say, well, you know the TOEIC test, right? You got 100 questions in the reading section. How much time to do those 100 questions TOEIC reading? Do you know? Is it 75 minutes? Right? Which means you have to answer 100 questions in 75 minutes you need fast reading. And most students, when they get to question number 70 or question number 80, the time is almost gone. So what do? Tick, 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 right? And the B, you should answer B every time. I heard someone say that. If you're going to guess B. It's probably nonsense. It's probably nonsense, but someone told me that. So we really need to build up the reading speed. There's a lot of issues about reading speed. How do you get faster? But this is by far the number one thing that you need for fast reading. By far, a large sight word vocabulary. Now, does anyone, you know the expression love at first sight? Love at first sight? You see that person and you don't have to think about it. Just, I love her. Oh, I love him. He's my one. That's my soulmate. Right? That's the belief. Probably nonsense. It's probably not true. But that's the belief about that, right? This is kind of the same, but not love at first sight. When you see the word, it's automatic, instant recognition. You see the word, don't have to think about it. You know it. Don't even have to think about it. So, in a way, we could say sight word is over-learning a word. You have seen that word so many times, and I mean thousands and thousands of times, your brain doesn't even have to think about it. It doesn't even spend 1 second, not even half a second. It's about 0.002 seconds, and it jumps to the next. It says, I know that. Next. What's next? What's next? Right? That's what you need for fast reading. In the Korean language, you have a very big sight word. If you read a lot, you have a huge sight word. In the English language, maybe you do, maybe you don't. If your sight words is big in English, there's only one reason. You read a lot. That's it. There's no other explanation. You have read a lot, so you have seen a lot of words again and again and again and again. No shortcut. No special computer chip I can put into your head. It's just, you want to read fast? Great. Read for 1,000 hours. Something like that. Students hate to hear that. Oh, you want a high TOEIC score? Well, great. All you have to do is read for about 300 hours, and it'll be a piece of cake. About 300 hours. And they go to Gangnam, where they say, we can give you a 995 score in 2 months. They're lying. They're lying. Well, so this kind of takes us back again to how do we build up automaticity? It's back to issue 1 again. Explicit vocabulary study has little effect on sight word development. Explicit vocabulary is just the first step, a very important first step, but it's just the first step. After that, what you have to do is just see it again and again and again and again. Different contexts, different kind of situations, different word forms, and so on. That brings us back to extensive reading and narrow reading. This idea that our students are reading every week for maybe an hour of reading, 2 hours of reading. Right? How much can you shake out of your students? The more, the better. So the question there is, are your students reading enough? If I look at a textbook, a reading textbook, and you have, unit 1, and there's usually one reading, one page, maybe another reading, page number 2. If that's their whole week, is just reading that 1,400 words in unit 1, that's the whole week, they're getting nothing. They're getting very, very little from that. They would need much, much more reading to get better and better. So what we have in our reading textbook, not bad, it's good, it's helpful, not enough. Absolutely not enough to really make a difference anyway. I'm not anti-reading books. I wrote a reading course book for Macmillan. Please buy it. But I have to be honest, it's not enough. We need extensive reading and narrow reading. Now, maybe I should go into what is narrow reading here, just without leaving it completely. But the idea of narrow reading is you read many books that are difficult in the beginning of the same genre. So, for example, let's go back to Harry Potter. What genre is Harry Potter? What genre would we say for that? It's kind of fantasy. I mean, definitely fiction, but it's kind of a fantasy thing. In the Harry Potter novel, there's a lot of difficult vocabulary, as I know. A lot of difficult vocabulary. Now, there's some that is very the usual vocabulary, no problem, but it also has some difficult vocabulary. The mid-frequency, the 8K range, the 9K range. If I give you an example, wand. Do you know the word wand? Yeah, what is that in Korean? I forgot. Jipungi or something like that? Yeah. It's not a very common word in Korean either. But it's that magic stick, right? This is not a high-frequency word. I did not use the word wand today on the subway. I saw nobody with a magic wand. Nothing. But it's, I think it's about 8K or 9K. It's kind of that high thing. But in the Harry Potter books, it's very high frequency. In any fantasy book, it's somewhat high frequency. And so, Harry Potter book number 1, a lot of new vocabulary. It's a little bit tough. But Harry Potter book 2, now you see that vocabulary coming back. It gets easier. Harry Potter 3, not bad. You can read it quickly. Harry Potter 4, 5, I don't know when she stopped. As you progress, it gets easier and easier. You're getting that vocabulary from that genre. Same thing for newspapers. If you read a lot of newspapers, at first it's quite difficult, but after a while, it gets easier. The Bible. Some Christians like to read the Bible in English. The first couple of chapters, very difficult. Then it gets easier and easier because that vocabulary comes back. So it's like extensive reading, but it starts difficult, and then it slowly gets easier and easier. But still, a lot of reading, a lot of repetition, and so on. Now, I'm not going to go over this chart very much, but I know that there are some people who think extensive reading sounds nice, it sounds lovely, right? They pick a book, they read it, it's fun, and then they get another book, and they say, but Professor Miles, these are easy books, especially parents. They say, oh, these are so easy books. My son knows all this vocabulary. Give him Harry Potter. And you have to say, he knows the vocabulary, but they're not sight words. He doesn't know it really strong. Just please, mother, please, father, just relax and let the English come in for hundreds of hours. He's getting better. Now, this is just the evidence of that. There's been many studies that look at one class doing very easy reading, but a lot of reading. One class doing difficult, challenging reading, and a lot of new vocabulary and so on. Now, if I just go to here, there are, what do we got? 26 studies that found equal results for both. 26 studies found extensive reading, intensive reading, same effect. There were, however, 24 studies that found actually extensive reading had better results. Only 3 studies found intensive reading had better results. Only 3. But there's more than that. These studies on this row were very short studies, 1 semester. These studies were for 2 semesters. These 10 studies down here were for more than 1 year. Do you see a trend? The longer they're reading, what is better, extensive reading or intensive reading? Extensive reading. The long studies, there were 10 of them, and 8 of them showed the extensive reading kids, they're better readers. The intensive reading students never won. 2 of them found equal results. The research is done, I think. The research was done probably 10 years ago. If you do a lot of intensive reading in your class, it's good. It's helping them. But for the long term, extensive reading has better results. For the long term, it's better. And students like it more. they enjoy it more. They read what they want to read. It's not so frustrating. It's not so stressful. They're naturally learning the language. Okay, now I don't want to get into that too much, but students learn to read by reading. Is that shocking news to anybody? How do you learn to be a good speaker? By listening to your professor talk about speaking? No, just by opening up your mouth and just talking and talking and talking. Reading, writing, everything's the same. This is not really shocking information that to get good at reading, students got to have a lot of time. Just, teacher, please be quiet, let me read. Just let me get better by reading. Sight word development. Extensive reading gives you those first 3,000 words quite well. Narrow reading, Paul Nation calls them the bridge readers, these kind of special books that help them get to the next step. It makes these into sight words. That's what extensive reading does. Automaticity and sentence parsing. This is just a way of saying understanding the grammar. So when you read the English grammar structures, you know very quickly how to understand them. Relative clauses. They're hard for Koreans. Relative clauses. I saw the man that you told me about. Right? In the Korean language, it's reversed. Right? The man you told me about, I saw. Right? Korea, you have a complete opposite structure than in English. It takes a while for the brain to get that accustomed to. That's what extensive reading does. They keep seeing those patterns, those grammar structures again and again, and they got it. They can get it quickly. Reading skills development, consolidation. I don't want to talk about this one for too much. Let me just check how I'm doing with my time. But a lot of people love to teach reading skills. I used to love to teach reading skills. And I had my students do a lot of guessing words from context, skimming, scanning. I used to do a lot of that. Now I do a little, just a little. Because when I looked at the research, if you're doing extensive reading, you get those skills anyway. Most students just get those skills naturally. We're not stupid. People are not stupid. Guessing words from context, if I just start to be a little bit negative here, just for a moment. How did you learn Korean language? Do you remember your first dictionary when you were 1 year old? You learned from context, 100%. Your mommy kept showing you this liquid. Say, juice, machalé, juice. And after a while, you realized juice was the orange stuff that tastes good. And you learn from the context. We're not stupid. If we're doing a lot of really engaging reading, our brain's saying, I think I can figure this word out. Keep going. It's very natural. It's a very natural kind of thing. Skimming and scanning, I kind of want to say the same thing. It's nice to show the students, these are a good skill, don't forget to use it. That's the key word, don't forget to use it. You already use it in Korean language. You already know the skill, just you're reading in English, don't panic, use your common sense. That's what I think it is, it's kind of common sense. Well, in my reading book, I have a lot of reading skills development. I'm a hypocrite in a way. But my editor just says this is what teachers want to see. They want to see a lot of reading skill development stuff. So I said, oh, fine, okay, here it is. But I question it. I question the value of it. All right. For getting back to that first question I had in the slide, if we look at those four, my point of issue 1 and issue 2 is I just want to see people come down here a little bit more. I want to see reading classes think about vocabulary more and talk about it with their students. How can you make your vocabulary bigger? What can we do? Let's try good ways to do vocabulary. Maybe in your class have regular vocabulary quizzes. That's fine. But just something where you're making the vocabulary bigger. And then time on task. Try to bring in, as much as you can, extensive reading components, some graded readers. Just let them relax and kind of read in some way. So that's my argument here for today, that in those classes we need a little bit more than that. In your private study, same, I think. I know some students are very ambitious and they get like the Wall Street Journal or a newspaper and they're reading it every day. And I'm thinking that helps you in some ways, but think about extensive reading also. Right? Think about some other things to develop your reading skills. Okay, I do have one more issue that I'll talk about very, very briefly, and it's call and mall for reading. Call, well, you probably know both of these. Computer-assisted language learning. What's mall? Mobile. Yeah. So your smartphone or an e-reader or something like that. Well, I'm going to have more questions than answers for this one. But what are the learning opportunities for this? I think they're fantastic. There's so many things that you can do on a computer screen that you can add. You can have the glossary, the pop-up glossary. They don't know the English word, put their mouse over it, the Korean translation pops up. I think that can be helpful. You can have audio, you can have pictures, you can have links to go for more information here and there. There's a lot of opportunities with this. And I'm excited about them. But what are the cautions? There's a lot, I think. There are a lot of cautions. And already in the States, we have seen a lot of schools just kind of throw money at it and give their students tablets or readers or something like that, more computer facilities. Nothing has happened to their reading scores. Nothing is happening. And in Korea, maybe the same thing is happening. Just Lee Myung-pak just threw a lot of money at everybody. Here, go buy some computers, buy something. And then the students come in and say, oh, wow, a tablet, or oh, wow, a computer center and things. But is the reading getting better? Right? That's the bottom line. Are they helping students read or not? Not yet, I don't think. I think not yet, or it's hard to say maybe. Yeah, that's my third one. What are the learning outcomes? Just what's the result of all of these things? And as I just said, I don't think we really know. Well, I'm pretty sure we don't know. The research hasn't really shown us that much. I have looked at a lot of these studies, though, because this is a very interesting topic to me. When I've seen a lot of studies that say we used the tablet in our class, or we used an e-reader or computer program, the students loved it. Success. Motivation. That's the problem with every one of those studies I read. The novelty effect. Do you know what the novelty effect is? What does novelty mean? What's the very simple three-letter word? New. So you give your students something new, and their eyes get big, and like, and they just love it, right? So they get kind of excited, and for 1 week, it's just great. Let's burn our textbooks. Let's never do those again, just computer all the time. Week number 2, week number 3, week number 4, it's not new anymore. It's still English. It's still the same vocabulary as the paper. And week 5, week 6, turn on your computers. Oh, something new. It's the same. It's the same. And so I see all these studies, and I think there's a lot of people in Call, a lot of Call scholars, who are just a little bit too excited. They're a little bit too excited. And they're really excited about the possibilities. And I agree with them. I agree with them 100%. But they need to slow down a little bit. And let's see what's actually happening. Let's go step by step. Few studies on learning outcomes, very, very few. Shockingly few. This is the number one question. And we're just not seeing a whole lot of people look at it. The early results suggest caution. And these are 2 studies that I found that are quite recent. One, the study of MP, had addressed the novelty effect. So his students read 5 books paper, these were the graded readers, 5 books digitally, and then at the end of the semester, said, what did you prefer? What did you prefer? It was a very surprising result. It was like 80 to 90% paper. They liked the paper. Now, this was not a perfect study because the reading they were doing on the computer did not have like a lot of audio or some of the special things. It was just very similar to what they saw in the book. But he just found that the students just didn't like it so much. And we think, you know, I'm a 40-something-year-old guy. And I think, you know, my generation, I grew up with books. So, you know, when I say like, I don't know, I really like a book. I like a book. And then other people say, you're just some old guy. You're old. You're dying. You're dead. The new generation, digital, digital, digital. It's the digital generation. And I say, I read digital too. But there's something different when I just have a book in my hand. And his study found what I kind of what I suspected. Something psychological happens when we hold a book, even the young generation, and when we read on a screen. Something's very different, I think, in our psychology. And that next one kind of answers that. The allure of multitasking. Now, rosin's not in our field, but he does a lot of work with multitasking. When you have your cell phone, you can be studying, reading or something, but is this the only thing your phone does? No. There's a two-word monster which makes all of our students not study well. Kakao Talk. Do you ever go to a library and see students reading or studying something? It's look at my book for 5 minutes. Oh, Kakao Talk 왔네. 언니 뭐 해? 그냥 있어. no. Back to reading for 2 minutes. 나중에 야 식사할래. Watch them. It is so depressing. And they say they're busy studying. They all say that, oh, professor, I studied for 4 hours. And I say, no, you didn't. You studied 1 hour, and 3 hours was Kakao Talk, checking email, going to YouTube. I have the same problem. When I'm on the computer, my mind says, oh, did you check Facebook? You didn't check Facebook for 10 minutes. Check. Oh, Kakao Talk from another friend. I have to answer her. It's killing our brains. What Rosin found out was that students who were using computers or something for study were 60% as effective of those who had no computer. That's almost twice as long. It's almost twice as long, and I think Korean students probably worse. Probably worse. Because you know, if someone sends you Kakao Talk, how quickly do you have to answer? Very soon. Because if you wait 10 or 20 minutes, 안 돼요. 왜 대답 안 했어? 나 싫어? I've heard students say that. If you get a Kakao Talk and you don't answer right away, why? What's wrong with you? This whole culture is kind of evolving right now, and it's our enemy, I think. Kakao Talk must die. No, it will never die. It will never die. We have to deal with these things. Eventually, reading and writing practice is going to be completely digital. Eventually. And this is not a bad thing. This is what I anticipate. There are so many good things that you have with this. Automatic scoring of quizzes, all the features there, I like them. And it is the future, I believe. We just have to realize there are some problems. Just throwing tablets or throwing computers at students will hurt them more than help them unless you realize, I've got to do something about these. I've got to consider these kinds of issues. And then we can make it work. I think we can make it work. Okay, for the conclusion then, more emphasis on vocabulary development, more time for reading, extensive reading, narrow reading, SSR. Does anyone know SSR? Silent, sustained reading. It's taking 10 minutes of class or 20 minutes of class time saying, get your book, your graded reader, sit down for 10 minutes, just quietly read. For 20 minutes, just quietly read. It's not easy to do, but I do it with my freshman students every year. And it's hard to get them, but after a while, I have them trained. If you doubt me, I'll take a video of my class And the first 5 minutes, they're kind of talking and the phones are out a little bit. But after 5 minutes, they get settled down. And then sometimes 25 minutes is up, 30 minutes is up, and I look at the class to start my class, and they're reading so well, I think maybe I should just shut up. Maybe I should just let them read. It's like 90% just reading their book, and they're really into it. And these are my freshman students who are kind of babies, in a way. They're lovely students. I love my students. I love babies. I love my students. But they're kind of a little bit immature. And it just takes a few weeks to get the system going. It just takes a few weeks to get it going. But it's more reading time. Keep an eye on developments in digital reading. Just pay attention to it. Conferences like this show this a lot, right? So they're good. Reading instruction without the above factors is or will soon be incomplete. Now again, this is just my opinion, but I think these are... two of these, at least, are not optional. The third one, I think, will not be optional very, very soon. The end. Thank you very much for listening.